The setting rays of the sun painted the stark white, concrete walls of the compound in shades of orange, red and burnt umber. Red sky at night, sailors' delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning, Xander muttered. He hoped this was a promising sign and tried not to think about how closely the darker tones resembled the color of blood. What? Sharky asked. Had she heard that? Nothing, it's just a saying I was thinking about. A saying, about sailors. She looked heavenward. And you say my quotes are weird. And you think quoting Indian tribes is more sensible? I don't just quote native tribes. He raised a brow. She looked down at her toes. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Marcus Aurelius said that and I think it says a lot and he wasn't an Indian. Well, who was he? I don't know, but he wasn't an Indian. Xander assured himself that the sky was red and things should be fine, then he sighed. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. He got up and took a step toward the path, which led to the compound's gate. The thing that bothered him more than anything else was the fact that the gate was ajar, because he had a horrible feeling that the dogs expected him and the slightly open gate was the gaping jaws of a trap. Sharky scrambled to her feet and came after him. I'm coming, too. Great. Don't sound so happy. Why should I be happy? I am helping. If you say so. What is wrong with you? Ever since your friend Simon arrived, you've been snappy as a squirrel. Xander stomped down the path for several minutes without saying a word. He had to get his emotions under control and the best way to do that was clear the air. How come you hate collars? He asked in what he hoped was a casual tone. Why do you think that? You don't wear one. Just because I've only ever had an itchy flea collar doesn't mean I hate them, but I certainly don't see any reason for wearing an emblem of slavery, so yeah, maybe I do hate them. You were smart to notice that. What do you mean your collar was itchy? She snorted. It gave me a rash, so I got rid of it. Where do you get the ridiculous idea that this is important? He stopped and turned to face her. You were issued a flea collar? That's what I said. She stared at him. Again, why is this so important to you? I've never met anyone who hadn't owned a real collar. He scratched his own. Well, now you have. Look, in case you haven't already figured it out, I don't have a pedigree and I'm not some hoity-toity cat with owners who buy them fancy baubles. Tears welled in his eyes. I'd hoped that you liked me for just being me, but I guess that was stupid, because you only like girls with pedigrees and pink collars with glitzy diamond studs. Pink collars with glitzy diamond studs, are you talking about Fluffy? As she nodded, a tear fell. What does she have to do with this? Everything. Sharky sniffed. Xander blinked in confusion. Why did Fluffy's collar of office bother her, when his own sapphires and Simon's tiger eyes didn't seem to? Are you jealous? She hung her head, refusing to answer the question, and that was answer enough. Fluffy is my friend, not my girlfriend. So you didn't give her the collar? He blinked at the startling question. Of course not, how could you, why would you? He paused and frowned as he thought over what she had told him. Didn't your parents register your birth? How would I know? I don't even know their names. All I know is that when I was 2 days old, my mother was run over while crossing the road and some humans took me in and fed me with bottles from a doll. Her nose turned red. When the kittens living on the dock found out about that, they laughed at me, then shunned me. What do you know about Catamondo? He sat down and stared at her, knowing that they needed to resolve this before walking into some trap. Cata what? Many millennia ago, Hather organized our species, and yes, there do seem to be an exceptionally high number of pedigrees in the highest offices, but each and every cat that has been born is part of it, and once every kitten is 6 months old, they are given a flea collar, as their graduation gift from basic education. Well, this is the first I've ever heard about anything fancy like that. He studied her. But you knew who I was and who Simon were. Well, duh, I can read the Daily Muse. Xander rose and with a swish of his tail, started toward the compound's gate. Right now, I need to find out what is going on with Esmeralda, but just as soon as I get that sorted, I'll take care of your problems. Don't bother. I've always gotten along just fine. You don't need to waste your precious time on me. Hush. Why? So you can continue to tell me I'm a problem? Well, I am not, and I'm certainly not yours. Fine. But for now, please be quiet. That gate should be locked, and since it isn't, it could be a trap, so could you please be quiet so I can listen for clues? She clamped her jaws together and nodded. He stayed where he was until the sun settled beyond the distant trees. Though there was still enough light to see, there were also many lovely shadows to melt into, which was perfect for infiltrating the compound, or for foiling a plot, if his straightforward approach did not work. Nighttime noises seemed normal, so he moved to the center of the path and strolled toward the gate, as if he was an invited guest. Xander walked through the gate alert for an ambush, a watcher, or anything hostile, though he tried to appear oblivious. His collar gave a faint vibration, which meant that he had stepped through a laser beam, so someone knew he had arrived. He stepped to the side of the path and glanced back at Sharky, who seemed to be attempting to copy his relaxed attitude. The gravel path wound through a well-tended garden. Off to the right, there were 2 buildings, which he suspected were barracks, but the main path curved to the left down the hill. Despite the fact that the laser should have alerted them to his arrival, all stayed quiet. They were certainly cool customers, and that generally meant professionals. He waited a few long minutes, still close enough to the gate for a hasty escape, but the only thing that happened was that night fully set in and distant bats squeaked as they left their lair to forage. Sharky chewed her lower lip, but didn't make a sound. Xander nodded, and began to walk down the winding path toward the main building. Sharky kept pace behind him, close enough to watch his back, or stab it, if that was her intent, but not close enough to get in his way and accidentally be injured by an erroneously placed kick, if they were attacked. They passed a water fountain, the water lily-covered fish pond that Peppy had admired, and 2 greenhouses. The large one on the left was filled with vegetables and spices. Though he was tempted, he did not pause to inspect the catnip. The smaller greenhouse seemed to be devoted to flowers, probably orchids, though he didn't know much about plants. At the bottom of the hill, a meter-wide shallow stream covered the path and a plank was conveniently laid across it. Instead of potentially stepping on the trigger for a trap, Xander jumped onto the rich, dark dirt of a garden on the other side, and sank up to his knees in slick, stagnant muck. A giggle from behind him was quickly muffled. He looked over his shoulder. Sharky was standing on the plank, lips clamped together and eyes crinkled with mirth. It was a struggle to extract each paw and step backward into the flowing stream, but he eventually managed to get all 4 legs deep enough in the running water to start washing away the reeking slime. 3 is a charm, Sharky whispered. He ignored her. Guests should stay on the path, a refined but slightly accented voice said. Xander turned his attention toward the speaker. Good advice, but a bit too late. True, the unseen speaker said. Once you get the worst off, it would be wise to wash with lemon juice because muck from the bog garden has a lot of fish waste in it, and if you wash with lemon, it cuts the smell. Again, good advice. Thanks. Sharky walked toward the darkest shadow and bashfully introduced herself. A pleasure to meet you. I am Duchess. Xander's fur stood on end as he finally recognized the slightly odd accent, dog. He shot out of the water, as if propelled by a rocket, and landed next to Sharky. Wow, Duchess said, no wonder Ms. Mitzi calls you the kamikaze. Very impressive, but you really should clean with lemon juice. She's right, another unknown voice said. As soon as you have, we can all have a nice chat. He stared at the source of the voice, but could only make out a medium-large, light-colored shape that seemed to be the correct dimensions for Dame Esmeralda. Dame Esmeralda, I presume? The form stepped forward and, indeed, was an elegant long-haired white cat, which looked a lot like his pal, Merlin. Since Merlin was related to Lady Montgomery, and thereby Dame Esmeralda, it was logical for them to look similar in the shadows. Suddenly, floodlights lit the area, blinding him. He tensed for an attack, but nothing happened. Eyes watering, both from the glare and the stink of rotten fish waste, Xander fought to regain his grasp of the situation. Sorry about that, another unknown voice said, but I have never been able to see as well in the dark as you, and my old eyes are not improving with age. The voice had a dog accent and seemed quite old. When Xander finally managed to get an eye open, he saw a large black poodle with a graying muzzle and rich red ascot sitting on the right side of an elegant white Norwegian forest cat, who could have been Lady Montgomery's double, and on her left was a much younger black female poodle wearing a glittery pink bow. Obviously, the dogs were Duke and Duchess. Xander blinked, but the image didn't go away, it simply became sharper. So, you weren't catnapped. Leaf green eyes widened for a brief moment before Esmeralda tipped her head back and laughed, while the dogs howled with mirth. Sharky looked at him, but Xander was not certain exactly why they found his statement so funny, so he shrugged. Finally, after several minutes, Esmeralda managed to ask, "Was that what Moo told you to motivate you to leave the Bahamian survey?" Moo? If you are referring to Lady Montgomery, then yes, that is what I was told, but I believe she got the information from Sir Simon. Duchess whooped out a big laugh. "I told you he had more of a talent for fiction than you gave him credit for." Disoriented, and not feeling as if he was in danger, Xander was tempted to sit down, but if he did that, the nasty slime could spread to uncontaminated fur, so he stood and tried to analyze how a red claw situation could have been called based on an exaggeration. The rating system needed a better check and balance, at the very least. "So, you know about the Bahamian survey?" "Well, of course I do, dear boy," Esmeralda said, "since I was the one who told Moo that we really needed the islands surveyed and safety bunkers built in areas that are prone to hurricanes." "Oh, true," Duke said. "After so many died during the last hurricane, we realized it was an issue. Valentine is doing something similar for the dogs, but is having quite a problem controlling his human." The three of them chuckled. Xander tried to get his thoughts to accept that Valentine's rank among the dogs must be similar to his own. "His human is helping," Duchess said, "just not in the way that Valentine wants." He should have expected that, Esmeralda said. After all, his human is a veterinarian. It should have been expected that he would see the plight of the island dogs and wish to help. She glanced at Duke. He just never imagined that his human's way of helping would be to set up clinics everywhere. Or think that spaying and neutering was the best way to deal with things. He is correct about it being effective to control the STDs and make sure the population doesn't expand too much for the available resources, Duke pointed out. "That's why they always set up the big tent on the beach?" Xander asked. The other three nodded. "You're talking about the slobbery red dog, right?" Sharky asked. Xander nodded. "That explains a lot." "Meaning?" "Well, half the dogs who welcomed him were happy to see him, but the rest were calling his boat the butcher ship and other not very flattering things." How had he missed that? Dialect? She nodded. "Well, let us not just stand here. Xander, my boy, you need to get those paws cleaned before the muck dries and makes it 10 times harder. Duchess, why don't you take Miss Sharky into the dojo for a snack?" She turned to Duke. "Could you assist Xander while I send a very succinct note to my idiot godson and tell him to get down here, instead of hide?" "That mongoose is with him," Duchess said. "What if he brings it? Then we finally meet the rascal. You know where he is." The words burst from Xander before he could control them. "Well, of course, dear boy. Why else would we leave the gate open in invitation?" "Why else, indeed? How?" Duchess snickered as she said, "I've known Simple Simon my whole life. Don't you think I know his pals? And don't you think that twit Tango stuck out like a sore paw when he kept flying overhead?" "We watched where he landed," Duke said with a shrug.